All right. With that, let's just start our meeting for today. So this workshop has been planned for 2 days. The first day, we will cover a whole bunch of topics around introducing the SAP ALM strategy, introduction to focus build. We will go deep dive into process management and requirements management, where we will also see some demos, live demos actually on our demo system, which you could also practice. By the way, it's the same system that is accessible to all of you. I will share the details, and you could also exactly do the same exercises that I do during the workshop at your own pace. And what we thought was that we will start with the ALM strategy today, and then go into deep dive with focus build. And on day 2, we go more deeper into the other areas of focus build and also have some discussions. With respect to the questions, I think it will be good if you can park them, and then we will come back at an appropriate time to listen to your questions. And at that stage, you can unmute yourself and ask your questions as well. With that, let me get into my presentation. Again, a welcome from my side. My name is Rajiv Kolupudi. I'm from the product team of SAP Solution Manager. And today I'm going to be the presenter for today and also for Monday. So what is ALM, or Application Lifecycle Management, as defined by us from SAP? It's about managing the lifecycle of the SAP applications. And the lifecycle aspect comes in 2 forms. One is, of course, the implementation aspect of the lifecycle, where we are talking about capturing the demand, building the solution, testing the solution, and deploying the solution, which is essentially your project methodology or project implementation. And then the other area is post-go live operations, where we are monitoring the solutions, monitoring the applications, monitoring the business processes, diagnosing the problems, finding out the root causes, correcting those problems, and also doing continuous improvement of the business processes, continuous improvement of the application. And all that aspect is also considered as application lifecycle management. Right. Essentially, it's to keep your business running, and then so that you can get faster value from the SAP solutions. Right. Faster value in implementation means that you can implement faster, more efficiently, with more transparency, and so on and so forth, with more automation. And faster value in operations is about business continuity, about keeping the lights on, ensuring that there is no unplanned downtime, to optimize your operations costs, and so on and so forth. Right. And that's the value of application lifecycle management. And we have various tools from SAP, one of the primary ones being SAP Solution Manager, which is what we will be covering today as well as on Monday. When customers look at ALM or our tools from SAP, they start with various different motivations, right? Some of them want to accelerate what we call as time to value, which means that they want to use Solution Manager and our ALM tools for accelerating their projects, accelerating their implementations. And that's one of the big factors where Solution Manager, especially Solution Manager 7.2, has been heavily adopted by many customers who are implementing SAP S/4HANA, for example, and so on and so forth. The idea being that they want to accelerate the projects, they want to accelerate their time to value, as we call it. Time to value meaning the day you start the project till the day you start to realize the value from S/4HANA, for example. That's the duration, that's the project duration, and that's what we want to accelerate with tools like SAP Solution Manager and Focus Build, which essentially means we are also trying to reduce the cost of implementation, because there's a lot of automation that we can bring in, a lot of transparency that we can bring in, and that eventually reduces the total cost of implementation of your projects as well. That's one set of customers looking at Solution Manager as their project tool. And then there's another traditional set of customers who want to ensure business continuity, who wants to reduce cost of operations, who want to automate their operations, who want to standardize their operations, both for their on-prem systems as well as their cloud systems. They want to keep their applications running. And that's the other motivation, which traditionally many customers, close to 13,000 of them, have adopted Solution Manager over the past couple of decades, in fact, to actually keep their applications running, right? Some of them have also gone one step further to actually benchmark how well they are running, how well their business processes are running, and also plan some improvements to those business processes and take one step further, which means that they're not just looking at these applications from a technical perspective, which means that to ensure that the system is up and running, but also seeing how well they can improve those business processes, which are then running on the SAP solution. So that's another level of maturity. And finally, we have a set of customers who are using end-to-end ALM from SAP, using a single source of truth. They're not trying to reinvent the wheel by looking at best practices from various other vendors, but looking at one single tool and using what we call as best of suite, and then optimizing the entire ALM cycle with one single tool, right? So that's another motivation for many of our customers. So let's look at these a little bit in detail before we dive into how we help in projects, because many of you might not be using Solution Manager to its full extent. So you might be looking at various other aspects than using it just for projects. So we could look at the other areas as well. So the first set, as I mentioned before, are the ones who want to accelerate time to value of their business applications and also reduce cost of implementation. Right. So how do we help? How does ALM tools like Solution Manager help? They help by allowing you to leverage pre-configured solutions, best practices from SAP, which automatically accelerate the overall implementation approach, right? And we have seen studies where projects which have started with a blank sheet of paper, which means that they have started drawing the business processes from scratch, versus projects which have started with best practices, either from SAP in the form of Activate best practices of model companies, or from one of our partners who have their own best practices as well. But starting with a pre-configured best practice solution accelerates the projects by 30 to 50%, right? So this is a huge benefit. So that itself accelerates the whole project quite significantly. So Solution Manager and Focus Build allow you to do that, which we will see today as well in the process management section, how we support you when you want to start with a best practice business process rather than drawing everything from scratch on a blank sheet of paper, right? There are other ways as well. The tools also allow you to follow an agile implementation approach, which is quite unique, especially when you talk about SAP implementations. Being agile, we need to be pragmatic about it. So we have a pragmatic agile approach that is supported by our tools, which we will see today, as well as mostly on the day two, where we see how Solution Manager and Focus will allow you to run the project in an agile way. And also test only what matters. Having some impact analysis tools will also help you, especially in regression testing within the projects and after the project. And also accelerating the test management itself, right? So test management is a big cost factor in project implementations, as many of you might know. So optimizing the testing, providing some automation, providing more transparency, providing ways to automatically generate test plans so that you don't spend humongous amount of time trying to figure out what to test in each of your project cycles and so on and so forth, right? So there's a lot of such automation and advanced functionality that is available in Focus Build, which we will see on day two, which helps you to accelerate testing as well. And in the process, we also automate a whole bunch of tasks. One classic example being project reporting. So the entire project reporting is automated in Focus Build. So that also saves you a humongous amount of time, especially from a PMO perspective. And that helps in reducing cost of implementation and eventually accelerating time to value as well. Right. So if you want to find reasons why you want to use Solution Manager or Focus Build to actually run your project, then these are the key messages, right? So we want to automate, we want to avoid as much manual work as possible, we want to reduce the cost of implementation and eventually accelerate the time to value of your project. Yeah. And if you are interested, more interested in this, we in fact have a value calculator. If you really want to put a dollar number against the value that you get by using tools like Solution Manager and Focus Build, there is a value calculator that is available on our support portal. You input some numbers in, and then it generates a business case for you. So if you want to convince your customer or yourself or your management in terms of the value that Focus Build and Solution Manager brings to an S4 project, for example, there is also a calculator available from our side which you can leverage. If you're interested, please feel free to reach out to us, and then I will share the link for that calculator. But you can also find it on Support Marketplace quite easily. So this is one set of customers. I'm hoping many of you are also in this bucket because you've joined this session, because this is what we will be addressing in our 2-day workshop, where we are looking at how we can accelerate project, or how we can accelerate implementation of SAP S/4HANA using our tools. Again, as I said, traditionally, many customers have been looking at other aspects of ALM as well, like ensuring efficient IT operations, which is about reducing cost of operations on one hand, but also more importantly, ensuring business continuity, which means that how do you ensure that there are no unplanned downtimes? How do you detect problems more proactively? How do you accelerate the problem resolution by having better root cause analysis tools? So as the number indicates here from one of our research with Gartner, and an average cost of 1 minute downtime, or unplanned downtime more precisely, costs you more than approximately $5,000, right? So the more we can do it proactively, the more faster we can resolve the problems. It directly translates to a business value as well, and reducing operations costs, right? So this is a key topic as well for using tools like Solution Manager and for IT operations. We have many tools, and this has been the traditional strength of Solution Manager for a couple of decades now. So we have a lot of customers who use Solution Manager as their IT operations platform for precisely these reasons. Again, there is a value calculator available for you if you want to look at more operations value. So there is also a Solution Manager value report that is available, which helps you create a business case for these aspects as well. Then, as I said, a more mature way of looking at ALM would be to look at benchmarking and looking at business process KPIs and planning business process improvement initiatives, which is not just looking at it from a technical, keeping the lights on kind of a perspective, but more looking at it from a business process perspective to see how well your business processes are running. Are there any backlogs on your business process? Are sales orders getting stuck somewhere? How can you increase the throughput of your business process? How can you reduce the lead time of the entire process? For example, if you want to reduce the overall order cycle time, what are the things that you can do? And many of these initiatives are then enabled by Solution Manager and the capabilities that we have in business process operations. So this is another initiative or another set of values that customers are looking at when they want to implement Solution Manager as well, right? And finally, we have, I think the ultimate goal would be to standardize ALM with one single tool to ensure that you have no handovers of information. If you have 3 different tools, one for testing, another for incident management, another for documentation, another for transport management, then all of these tools have to talk to each other, and that creates a humongous amount of complexity. And the ultimate goal for us would be to provide one single tool that is, for example, Solution Manager for all on-prem centric customers, and that would be a goal as well for many customers to actually look at one integrated ALM from a process perspective, but also from a tool perspective, right? Whether you are managing on-prem systems or cloud systems or a hybrid scenario, especially, then you have one single tool which you can use to actually manage your entire ALM, and that would be the ultimate goal as well. And this could save a lot of money as well from a licensing of third-party tools. So we, as you all know, Solution Manager is included as part of your support contract. So there is no additional license for using Solution Manager. So from that point of view, this makes a humongous business benefit as well to actually bring it down to one single tool as well. So these are the reasons why customers are looking at Solution Manager to either looking at it from a project perspective, or looking at it from operations perspective, or business process improvement perspective, or consolidating their ALM tools. They're looking at various different perspectives and then saying that they're starting their Solution Manager journey. Now, we do have three different products in our product portfolio, and what we are talking about is Solution Manager and Focus Build today. This is primarily for our on-prem centric customers, so customers who have their ERP or digital core as an on-prem system, like S/4HANA on-prem, for example. For those on-prem centric customers, we position Solution Manager, or Solution Manager is your go-to tool for ALM. If you are a customer with some advanced needs, or if you're a service provider who's trying to support hundreds and thousands of different customers in one single system, then Focus Run would be your solution. If you are a cloud-centric customers, or a pure cloud customer, or cloud-only customer, for example, you only have SuccessFactors from SAP and nothing else, for example, then Cloud ALM would be your tool. This is another ALM tool. If you have not heard, this is something that is going to be available to all customers mid of this year. An earlier version was released for S/4HANA Cloud customers last year, but the big release is happening sometime next month or middle of this year. And that's when cloud customers or cloud-centric customers will also have an ALM tool, like all our on-prem customers have Solution Manager. But today and on day 2, we're going to talk about Solution Manager and Focus Build. It does have everything that you need from an ALM perspective for both on-prem as well as some hybrid scenarios. And what we will be looking at is how does that help in an implementation project, right? Especially if you're implementing SAP S/4HANA. While we take SAP S/4HANA as an example, the same thing could be applied to anything, any other SAP application that you're implementing, or any other project that you're undertaking. The concepts that we talk about today are going to be relevant for any kind of project. But of course, many of our customers are leveraging it for S/4HANA implementations. All right, so let's dive deep into Solution Manager and Focus Build now. And I would like to start with this. Maybe you have seen this in any of our previous presentations, but I think it is still quite relevant and quite important to actually have a bird's eye view of all the tools and capabilities that we have when we are thinking about an S4 implementation, right? And this, what we call as a metro map, covers all capabilities, both in Solution Manager, but around Solution Manager as well, which are relevant for you to consider when you're thinking about an S/4HANA project, right? At the very early stage, let's say you're not even started your S4 project, you're still thinking about whether you should go for SAP S/4HANA migration or new implementation, or if so, what is the value for moving away from your ECC system to S/4HANA. There's a lot of tools available from SAP to actually build that business case. Tools like Transformation Navigator. If you have not seen that, I would highly recommend you to check it out. It's an online tool. It's free of charge. You can just go there and then figure out your value roadmap to actually figure out why you have to implement SAP S/4HANA or our other solutions, and then how do you plan a roadmap, a transformation roadmap for yourself based on where you are and where you would like to go. It gives you a lot of guidance, a lot of information, and also helps you create a business case for yourself. So Transformation Navigator is a great starting point when you're thinking about an S/4HANA implementation. There are a lot of other tools like Business Process Reality Check. SAP Activate methodology also plays a role to give you guidance in terms of a project methodology, which we will also be leveraging in Solution Manager, by the way, the Activate methodology. There are also technical tools like Readiness Check, which allows you to check the readiness of your existing ECC system. If you're thinking about conversion or converting that ECC system into an S/4HANA system, and this readiness check gives you a lot of information on how ready is your system to be converted to an S/4HANA system, right? So even before you start the project at an earlier stage, even before the prepare phase of the project, there's a lot of things that you can start to use from our portfolio. But once the project kicks off, then we start with project management, looking at starting the project. We look at a lot of core functionalities of Solution Manager, starting with process management, where you can do a full-fledged blueprinting with Solution Manager. There's a lot of content that we can import into Solution Manager, best practices from SAP, best practices from SAP Model Company. These are industry best practices from SAP that you can purchase. All of this content can be imported into Solution Manager. And what we also see is that at least a few of our key partners are also developing their own best practice content in Solution Manager, so that when they start the project, they can accelerate the project by just importing the entire best practice blueprint from the partner side, from an SI or systems integrator side. They are bringing their content, which is pretty rich in terms of, it's not just about process models. They are pre-building test cases. They are even building automated test cases and bringing it to the table. So that completely changes the game in terms of how fast you can actually deploy their best practices at a customer, right? So this is a key accelerator. You leveraging these pre-configured best practices either from SAP or from one of our partners will completely accelerate your project, as I mentioned before. Then we get into the typical requirements to deploy mode, which is about looking at these processes, reviewing it with business, capturing the gaps and requirements, then building these requirements or realizing these requirements, testing them, combining all of these changes into a release and deploying the release, etc. So a lot of capabilities will play a role, which is what we will be looking at today. And Focus Build, the add-on that we're going to talk about today, is also in this space where it's going to completely accelerate this whole process with the pre-configured requirements to deploy solution. I will explain that in more detail as we go along. So essentially, it's like a shortcut as depicted on this metro map. Instead of you configuring each of these different areas in Solution Manager, you just configure and set up Focus Build, and that will set up everything that you need for an implementation project. Yeah, and that's what we will look at today and also on day 2 in terms of how Focus Build works and how Focus Build helps you in running a project from day 0 of the project until you go live, right? And then, of course, after go live, we get into the traditional operations capabilities of Solution Manager in terms of application operations, business process operations, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So the focus of our workshop today is in the middle, where we are talking about once you start the project, once you decide to implement, let's say, SAP S/4HANA, and you're about to start the project from day 0 onwards until you go live, what are all the things that that are required for you, and how Solution Manager and Focus Build help you and enable you to run such a project. Yeah. All right. So what does Solution Manager offer for project delivery? The idea is to reduce the total cost of implementation, or sometimes called as TCI. So the idea is to reduce the TCI by offering you a whole host of capabilities when you are trying to implement any of our applications from SAP. So right from planning and control in terms of building a project management. So we have built-in project management with built-in project templates from SAP Activate, for example. We could also integrate with your ERP systems to do financial project management. That's not included in Solution Manager directly, but Solution Manager can talk to your ERP system and also bring in the financial budget-related aspects of your projects as well. We could also do effort planning and time recording. We can do resource management. We can create a work breakdown structure. We can do full-fledged automated project reporting as well, right? So that's all we could do in planning and control, right? Which is in itself a lot of capability. Then we get into design and build. This is about blueprinting, looking at best practice processes, doing graphical modeling, the capability that is built into Solution Manager, doing process management. So process management for us is not just about drawing processes or graphical modeling of the processes, but really using these processes as the bedrock, as the baseline for everything that we do in the project, to capture requirements against these processes, to do testing against these processes, to create work packages, work items, and transports associated with these processes. So everything and anything that we do in Solution Manager will be revolving around these business processes. So process management becomes the fundamental building block for running anything in Solution Manager. Then we have requirements management, and then of course to actually build the solution itself, which is about converting these requirements into work packages, which can be assigned to developers, and developers come and test, and so on and so forth. And then that's when we go into test management, where we have support for manual testing, automated testing, test planning, test reporting, test analytics, and so on and so forth. And finally, deployment management, which is about ensuring all the changes that are being done in the project, which are captured in the form of transport requests, are all fully automated in terms of the management of those transports, in terms of movement of the transports, in terms of bundling of those transports, and releasing those into production. So all of that capability is also available in Solution Manager. As you can see, it's a lot, and we will try to navigate through much of what is described here in these 2 days. So there's a lot of ground for us to cover. And we will try to take an approach where we go in a sequence of a project, which means that we'll almost go through a project cycle, start with the initial phases of process management, then go into requirements management, which is a typical sequence of what happens in an ideal project as well. Most importantly, the focus build aspect. Until end of last year, this was an add-on that was separately licensed and also available to our premium engagement customers like Max Attention customers. But starting this year, since Jan 1st, 2020, the usage rights of focus build and also focus insights, which is, by the way, another dashboarding capability that is also available to you. Both of these solutions are now available as part of Solution Manager usage rights, which means that there is no additional cost to anything that I'm going to show or talk about today and as well as on day 2. It's all included in your Solution Manager usage rights, right? So that's an important aspect. And this was a big decision from SAP as well, because there's, a lot of, we could have made more money by continuing to keep Focus Build only as a licensed product, but we see that this is an essential tool that is needed for our customers to start their digital transformation, to move to SAP S/4HANA, right? So that was the ulterior motive for us, to enable our customers, to support our customers in their digital transformations. So with that in mind, we've decided to make Focus Build and Focus Insights free of charge or included in the Solution Manager usage rights. Yeah. So anything that I'm going to talk about today and also on day 2 is all available to you, all of you. So what does Focus Build contain? So as I mentioned before, Focus Build is an add-on. Technically, it's an add-on on top of Solution Manager. So you have to, from a technical perspective, you have to set up that add-on. It's called ST-OST, right? So that's the add-on that you have to deploy. And the version, it has its own support package stack, which means that it has a dependency on the Solution Manager support package. So each Solution Manager support package will have a corresponding Focus Build support package available for you. So you need to deploy that. But what does it contain? So essentially, it contains pre-configured requirements to deploy process, which means that it is pre-configured in the sense that you don't need to worry about configuring Solution Manager once you put in Focus Build. So it comes with its own workflows, it comes with its own transaction types, its own entities like requirements, work packages, and so on and so forth. And all of that has been pre-configured to work together as an integrated requirements to deploy process, right? And I will explain that in my next slide in terms of how that process works. Right, and it also supports Agile. So Focus Build has a lot of Agile methodology built in terms of planning your releases into waves and sprints and running the project in an Agile way, especially the build phase, right, or the realization phase. That's where we bring in the Agile aspects. It also has integrations into Agile tools like Jira. So if you're planning to use Jira, then Focus Build integrates with Jira, which means that the entities which are created in Solution Manager in Focus Build are seamlessly integrated, synchronized with Jira entities like user stories and backlog items. And then the statuses can be exchanged between these two tools as well. And together with this, there's a lot of high usability user interfaces that are then included in Focus Build. So we have Fiori-based user applications for user interfaces for developers, Fiori-based applications for testers, and so on and so forth. So that makes it extremely user-friendly for while we are trying to make the end user life easy with our business applications. With Focus Build, we are trying to make the IT users much more easier to access the tools. Like for the first time, we have a Fiori app for developers, for architects, for testers, and so on and so forth. And finally, it also has project governance with automated dashboards, which is a very key functionality, which is what motivates many of our project teams and customers to actually look at the Focus Build, because this kind of transparency and this kind of reporting was not possible elsewhere, right? And I will also show that as a short demo, as one of my initial demos as well in a minute. Right. So that's all Focus Build is all about. It also has a lot of training built in. So there's a lot of training material available for you. There's also an open SAP course, which I will share at the end of day 2, which covers much of what I'm talking, but it's a little bit more in detail. So if you want to train your project teams, if you want to put that as part of your onboarding procedure of your project teams, etc., you can use the Open SAP course. It ran in October last year, but it's available in the archive, so you can actually have, it's role-based as well. So there is a module for project managers, there's a module for developers, there's a module for testers, and so on and so forth. So accordingly, you can ask your project team members to attend the Open SAP course to get them trained on how to use Solution Manager and Focus Build for their project, right? So that's Focus Build. It's a turnkey solution, which means that the effort to implement Solution Manager is what we have been targeting, to reduce that, because otherwise we see that customers are spending weeks and weeks just to configure Solution Manager before they can use it for a project. So with Focus Build, we bring it down to less than a week. So as soon as you put in Focus Build, it is ready to use, and then you can concentrate more on what you want to do in the project rather than worry about tools and how to configure the tools. So that's the philosophy of the motivation behind Focus Build with Solution Manager. So how does that architecture work? Before we go and see a short demo of Focus Build. So everything starts with process management, as I mentioned. So you have a process model as a starting point. Whether you draw this model from scratch or you start with the best practice from SAP, that's up to you. We recommend all our customers to look at SAP best practices, activate best practices, or model companies, or at least partner-based best practices, something as a baseline. So you start with a baseline, then you adapt it as per your business needs, and then come up with the final process model. And based on this process model, we start to create requirements. Requirements are entities within Focus Build that are created against process models, right? So when you're reviewing a business process, your to-be business process with your business, and you identify that some configuration has to be done in S4, or some additional enhancements have to be done, some write-ups have to be done. So you create for each of those gaps that you find as requirements. Right? And these requirements are entities and they have their own workflow. And today, one of our modules is requirements management. We will see how requirements are then created and managed in Focus Build. From these requirements, we create work packages. So as the name suggests, this is a package of work that needs to be done to realize one or more requirements. So it's an end-to-end relationship. So you can have many requirements being realized with one work package, or one requirement could be delivered in multiple work packages. So it's up to you how you want to architect that. But then each of these work packages are then subdivided into work items, which are then assigned to developers. So each work item is typically one piece of work that needs to be done on a given system, right? And that is assigned to the developers. And the transport requests are actually created beneath this work item, right? So you have a business process. From there, you have a requirement. From requirement, you have a work package. From work package, you create work items, right? As a 1 to n between work package and work items. And underneath the work items, we have the transport request. So as you can see already, that there is already a traceability that is built in, that every transport that is created in the project has a path back to a business process via the requirements. Yeah. So that's the philosophy behind having everything integrated with each other. And while you do all of this, you might be creating a whole bunch of specification documents, design documents for these work packages, etc. And those documents are stored against the process, right? In this red box that you see on the left-hand side. And the reason behind is these documents have to live beyond the project, which means that they belong in the process model, so that after the go live of the project, these documents could still be referred, they could still be required. Whereas these requirements, work packages, work item related information is not something that you would need after the project goes live. You could still need it for a project audit or for reference purposes, but for a day-to-day operations, you would not need all of that. Whereas these design documents are something that you would need, and that's why they are stored in the process management area, and that's what is something that we will survive beyond the project as well. Similarly, if you create test cases, those are also stored against the process model, and that's what those will also be available for testing within the project, but also beyond project as well. So based on these test cases, then you would create test plans for your integration testing, project testing, user acceptance testing, or if you want to do regression testing, you could create test plans and packages and use our test suite, which is available in Solution Manager, which is also accelerated and pre-configured with Focus Build. And that's what you would use to actually run your entire testing for the project. And all of this is from a schedule perspective managed by project management capabilities in Solution Manager and Focus Build, where we have a project plan. Either you can create a plan from scratch, or you can use one of our Activate templates and use the templates to create a work breakdown structure. And you could also divide the project into waves and sprints. We will also understand that on day 2, how this whole concept works. So this is to bring in some agile aspects into your realization phase. And that whole scheduling with milestones and quality gates and the dates against them is all done in the project plan, in the project management capability. While all of this is happening for the transport and release management, we have release management capability that is also pre-configured with Focus Build, where Solution Manager and Focus Build will then manage your transports in terms of movement of transports from one system to another based on appropriate statuses of these work packages and work items, and also eventually bundling everything into a release, a package, which could then be deployed into production. So that entire process of transport management and release management is completely automated with Solution Manager. And that also accelerates your project quite significantly, because you don't need one person tracking all the transports in an Excel spreadsheet with all the dependencies and so on and so forth. All of that is avoided because Solution Manager does that for you with the help of Charm and release management. And just to let you know, Charm, or change request management, is built into Focus Build. So in other words, Charm is leveraged and Focus Build is built on top of Charm, right? And release management, which is also a standard capability of Solution Manager, is also leveraged in Focus Build. And finally, when all of this happens, we will be able to collect all of that into a seamless solution readiness dashboard, which allows you to track everything that is happening in the project, right from requirements to work packages to work items to testing to project schedule to documents that are getting generated, etc. All of that could be tracked with one single dashboard, which we call as the solution readiness dashboard. Right? That's where everything comes together. Because everything happens in one single tool, we are able to use all of the data that we have in Solution Manager and Focus Build to generate such a dashboard, which is extremely useful for PMOs to actually run the project on a day-to-day basis. Okay? And typically, customers ask us, when should I use Focus Build? And when is it strongly recommended, right? I would say with any implementation project, you could use Focus Build, but there are certain key characteristics which makes it more compelling to use Focus Build, right? For example, if your project is a business process driven project, right? Especially if you're leveraging best practice content from SAP or model company, then definitely Focus Build and Solution Manager would make sense. If you have enough work to do in the build phase, which is about, it's not just a technical conversion to S4, but you're actually doing some write-ups or gaps or doing some work with transport requests, etc. At least 30 different transports, for example, then already there is a compelling case to use something like Focus Build. But on the other hand, if you just have a technical upgrade that you're doing with hardly any transport related work and you're just doing a technical upgrade by managing the downtime, then something like Focus Build might not be required. Right? So that's the message behind point number 2. Especially if your project team is distributed across multiple locations with remote delivery, and looking at the situation right now, many of the projects going forward will all have remote delivery. So to actually have one single view, or to have the transparency for the project management team to actually track the project, it becomes extremely important to have a single tool like Solution Manager and Focus Build. Right? Of course, if you're using SAP value assurance packages or SAP's involvement in the project, then Focus Build services are involved and all the deliverables are also tracked via Solution Manager. Then we also have Solution Manager. If customers who are already using Solution Manager or plan to use Solution Manager post go live, then definitely Focus Build and Solution Manager make sense, because a lot of assets that you create within the project are seamlessly available for post go live operations, right? So this is one of the key benefits, which is sometimes ignored or forgotten, that Focus Build and Solution Manager usage is not just about using it within the project, but creating assets which are seamlessly available and readily available for post go live operations. Right? And then, of course, if you want to follow agile principles, then Activate methodology, then of course Focus Build and Solution Manager makes sense. And the other important question is the timing of introducing Focus Build. Let's say if you have a project which is 6 to 8 months and then you're already in the build phase, right? introducing focus build could be a challenge at that time because there's a lot of stuff that has already been done, maybe outside of the system. Retrofitting that into Solution Manager by redrawing the processes, etc., will actually be counterproductive. So in those cases, we are sometimes recommending that they just get the process models and test cases into the system at the fag end of the project, so that at least that could be used in post-go live operations. But if you are anywhere in the earlier stages of the project or before the start of the project, definitely it makes sense to introduce Solution Manager and focus build. But if you are in the middle of the project, then it becomes a challenge. I mean, we do have projects who have introduced it at the middle of the project as well, but then they'll have to understand that that's a bit of a challenge to actually get stuff which is outside of the tool back into the tool. Yeah. With that, let's look at a short demo. But before I go to the demo, let me just see if I can somehow look at the chat window and see if there are any questions or comments. I just see one chat. If a development needs to happen outside of SAP, would you still be able to? Yes. If the development is happening outside of SAP, yes, you can capture that as a requirement. You could also capture that as a work package. You could also capture that as a work item to be tracked and managed through Focus Build and Solution Manager. The only thing that you would not have is the transport request underneath, right? But if it's a technology that is supported by CTS Plus and you can bundle that into a transport, then Solution Manager can also manage that. For example, Java related changes, etc. Solution Manager can still manage that because it could be bundled into a transport like CTS Plus, right? We will come back to that on day 2 if you still have that question on day 2, right? Let me just see. I think I'll have to share my screen again. Good. Let's go to the demo now. I hope you're still able to see my screen. Good. First of all, I think I would like to highlight the support marketplace. If you go to support.sap.com, there is an ALM area under Solution Manager. Under the ALM, we have Media Center and Demos. And this is where we have a live demo system, which is what I'll be using today and on day 2. And this is what you could use to run through these exercises yourself, because there are standard users that you can all use for your own purpose. So if you have not seen this, this is extremely useful. So I'm on that page right now. This is the system, which is on Solution Manager 7.2 SP10, the latest support package, with Focus Build, STOST, SP05. Right, that's also the latest support package of Focus Build and Focus Insights. And then we also have an S/4HANA system, 1909 system that is pre-connected to the system, so that you can also navigate to S/4HANA if required for some of the scenarios. Right, that's the system that we have. If you want to launch it, you just click on the Solution Manager Launchpad link here. And then there are a whole bunch of users that you can use. So if you want to see how a project manager works, then you can log into this Isabel Dupont user. What I have used typically is this last user, which is Agatha. And this user is an all-in-one user, so you can actually test out everything. That's what I use for my demonstrations. But if you want to see the perspective of a particular user type, like a test engineer or a tester or a developer, you can log into each of those users and then see how it works. It's a standard password, Solman72 with SCAPS. Once you log in, of course, you see the Solution Manager dashboard, Fiori Launchpad. And this is where I am. And because I logged in with the Agatha user, I have access to everything. And I see all the pre-configured Solution Manager roles as well. The Solution Manager, Focus Build users as well, like the Focus Build Project Manager, Focus Build Developer, Focus Build Architect, and so on and so forth. And right now, for a short demo, I want to use the Focus Build Project Manager and then look at the Solution Readiness Dashboard. Yeah. As you can see, there are multiple tiles here. You can see that there are my requirements, which have my involvement. There are about 40 of them, my work packages. We also have risk and issue management, so 7 risks and 329 issues. Not a very good day for a project manager, but all of that is readily available if you log in as a project manager. Similarly, if you log in as a tester, then it's much more simpler. You want to see what tests I have to execute and what happens to my defects, right? If you're a test manager, then you're looking at much more, looking at test execution, assigning testers, test plan management. The test suite dashboard is also available here, and so on and so forth. So we have pre-configured user roles as well in Focus Build, which you can leverage by assigning different project users to these different Focus Build user roles as well. Let's quickly look at Solution Readiness Dashboard, because that really encapsulates everything that Focus Build can do, so that you get a flavor of how a project running with Focus Build will look like. So imagine that you are running the S/4HANA project, you are in the middle of the build phase, and on a Monday morning, you want to run a PMO status meeting, right? And this is what you would log into as a project manager. You would open the solution readiness dashboard. There are no PowerPoint presentations because all the status is here. You don't need to run around on a Friday collecting all the status from different streams, different groups, different team members in terms of where they are, and then prepare slides, which will then be presented on Monday. Instead, you open a dashboard like this, right, which is a solution readiness dashboard, which shows the status, overall status, what's happening with work packages, what's happening with work items, what's happening with requirements, what's happening with issues, risks, scope changes, documentation, and so on and so forth, right? Everything available in one place. Let's say you want to first discuss the work packages in the PMO meeting, you jump into the work packages and then see that there are 56 work packages, 20 of them will be delivered in wave 1, 31 in wave 2, 5 of them in wave 3, right? Many of them are unassigned to any category. There are 3 in the FI space. So if you want to look at just the FI ones, then you jump into the FI ones and then see the FI ones. I think something happened here. There was supposed to be 3. Let me just go back and see if that works. There's only 1 functional one, and then FI ones are 3. Should be more actually. Let me just see if I can go to 2 or 3 here. You can also filter based on waves and then see the different work packages and so on and so forth, right? And then from here, you can actually jump into the work package and actually take the action, which means that you can look at the work package, look at the specification, find out who is the developer assigned to it, and then catch hold of him or her, and then do some action as well, right? So the idea is to start at a high level in the overall dashboard and then drill down into various details. Yeah. Similarly, you can do the same thing with work items. For example, if you want to look at the requirements backlog and you see that there are 38 requirements in progress, which means that something is happening with these requirements. Somebody is working on the work packages and so on and so forth. One of the requirements is already completed, which means the work to realize this requirement is already completed. There are a whole bunch of them which are unassigned, which means that nobody is working on them. And then as a PMO, you're worried about it and you want to look into it. You click on that and then you see those 19 requirements and then see what's happening here. There are some very high ones. Why is that nobody is working on it? Let's say there is a Fiori application requirement for billing document that is needed by the users and it's unassigned to any work packages. Nothing has happening. So you can task someone to actually do this. You can go in there, assign it to someone, create a work package, and so on and so forth. All of that you can do directly from here. So if I click on it, you will directly go into the requirements management and then look at that particular requirement in detail, right? So it's from the high level dashboard, drilling down into details, and finally launching the actual transaction as well. In this case, a particular requirement which is unassigned. Right, so this is a particular requirement which is unassigned. You can actually take an action now, and then for some reason it's coming in German, but you can take some action now and then move forward as well. All right, so that's the dashboard, and then it has various tiles. Most of these tiles you can drill down. For example, you want to look at risks as a project manager, and then this is the risk map, heat map. Risk levels are defined based on impact and probability of that risk. And then you can see the various risk levels from risk level 1 to risk level 9. There are 2 risks which are in different statuses on risk level 9, and you would want to address them. You can click on it and then go into looking at that particular risk as well, right? Similarly, you can track the deliverables of the project, like for example, specifications, which is an important deliverable of the project, and you want to see how well you're doing or your project team is doing. 10% of the specifications are done, 8% are to be done, 6% are not having any date or a milestone, but 76% are overdue. Not a very good day for specifications again, right? You want to know why nobody's creating specifications. You click on that, it shows you all the work packages which do not have a specification. Right, the development has started, it's going on, but then there is no specification available, or the development is supposed to start, but there's no specification. Again, you can look at this and then see why this is not happening, and then ask the specific person in terms of why specification is not available and take some actions. Right. So as you can see, you can really run the project live with this, which means that it is there's no running around trying to find information, but all information is available. Many projects also use this to actually display this on a TV in the project room just to see where everybody is. And you can also track scope changes. You can also have sub projects. If you have a very large program where you have sub projects available to be created, then you can also have a, let's say for a whole master data related work, you want to create a sub project, then you click on that, you will only see a subset of data. Now we only are dealing with 11 work packages and 6 work items, which are all related to the master data project. So you can look at it at a program level, or you can look at it at a project level as well. This kind of transparency is enabled by Focus Build. Yeah. So we will understand this more in detail. We will come back to this dashboard during various of our demos. We will now jump into a little bit more details on what does it take to actually use process management with Solution Manager and Focus Build. Right. Let's see, there are a couple of messages in the chat. Please send the demo link. Okay, we will get to that. It's available on Support Marketplace, so it's very easy to find. Support.sap.com, go to ALM, and then go to Media Center and Demos, please. That's the easiest way to find. But we will send the link along with the presentation. All right. Okay. Now let's get into a little bit more details. So the first deep dive will be in the area of process management. Yeah. And as I mentioned before, process management is a capability within Solution Manager, which is also enhanced by Focus Build. What does it mean? So it's not just about modeling the business processes. Of course, we can have business processes modeled in Solution Manager, but process management for us is a little bit more holistic. As depicted here, it's well linked and integrated to various areas of Solution Manager. For example, process management is linked to project management, right? Process management is linked to change management, which means a change in transport management. From the process, you can see what work packages you have. From the process, you can see what requirements you have. From the process, you can see what test cases you have. So it's integrated with test management, and it is integrated eventually into release management and transport management. So everything is linked with each other. So the idea of managing business processes and documenting business processes in Solution Manager, it's not just about replacing Visio or tool like Aris with Solution Manager. Of course, you could do that, but it's more looking at it from a holistic standpoint and bringing in what I call as a process thinking through the project, right? So you document your processes in the design phase, but those processes will not be lost after the design phase, but they will be used in the build phase, they'll be used in the test phase, they will continue to be used through and through with the project, right? There's a life cycle to it through the project as well, right? And that's why process management is pretty important for the usage of Solution Manager and Focus Build in your project. The integration aspect is something that's a key message here. With Focus Build, what we also do is we support, of course, the import of the best practice content, so which means that it allows you to start with baseline processes that are coming from SAP or from one of our partners. It allows Focus Build also allows you to document the requirements that you have in Focus Build directly created against the business processes that we have in Solution Manager. Then we can create specific design documents, which means that let's say you're sitting in a work package, you are a developer working with a work package, and you want to create a specification. So from the work package UI, you click on a button and you create a specification document that comes and gets stored against the business process for which this work package is created, right? So there's a seamless integration between different entities and applications within Focus Build back to the process models and process structures. So it's very important to understand how these relationships work, and how and also shows the importance of process management or process models and structures for the working of Focus Build in general, right? And of course, we can create BPMN-based diagrams, business process modeling notation. That's the modeling notation that Solution Manager uses, and you can use that to create your own processes, enhance your own processes. And then what we can also do with Focus Build is monitor the documentation progress. As I mentioned before, we saw quickly in the readiness dashboard demo how you can track the functional specification delivery, right? Where they are overdue, whether they are completed or not. So the whole tracking is done through Focus Build, but eventually the functional specifications are actually residing in process management in the against the process structures of Solution Manager. Yeah, so that's how focus build works from a process documentation perspective. The access is via the Fiori Launchpad, which you have seen already. That's easy. Most important to also understand is that there is a distinction that you need to understand when we talk about process management, or sometimes also called as solution documentation. We need to distinguish between two areas. One is what we call as process hierarchy, which is essentially a structure, which is a nested folder structure, which you can have any number of levels, and that's what we call as process hierarchy, right? And then having process diagrams, right? Diagrams are graphical representation of the process using BPMN notation. You could have different kinds of diagrams at different levels, right? What is essential or mandatorily required is the structure. So we definitely need the structure for Solution Manager and Focus Build to work, but the diagrams are not mandatory. Of course, we would need the diagrams to show it to their business users and so on and so forth. But for the working of Focus Build, the structures are mandatory, but the diagrams aren't mandatory, right? So you can run the project without the diagrams, but then you definitely need the structures to hold the documents, to hold the test cases, to use them for creating requirements and so on and so forth. So the structures are definitely needed, but then the process diagrams are not needed for Focus Build. But of course, without diagrams, you can't run the project, which means that you need the diagrams to actually show graphically how the process flow works back to your business users during the design reviews, so that you can collect the feedback and identify the gaps and requirements against it. So process diagrams are created most often than not in the projects, but you need to understand the distinction that there is a hierarchy underneath which the diagrams are created. Right, so there's process hierarchy and then process diagrams. Seems to be there are some questions on the chat. I will come back to them as we move forward just before the demo of the process management. Another important aspect to understand is the concept of a solution, right? So we keep using solution documentation. The name of the product is also Solution Manager. There is an entity in Solution Manager 7.2, which is called a solution, which has various aspects, essentially that encapsulates everything, all documentation that is needed to capture the solution of the customer. So if you're a customer which has multiple business systems, you have SAP ERP, maybe you have CRM, you have portal, and you have some non-SAP applications, and you want to represent what is the solution landscape, and that is documented within the solution. So it is cross-product, which means that you don't have one solution for ERP, one solution for CRM, etc. There is one single solution for a given customer. Most often than not, most of our customers require only one solution. Very, very few cases, they might require more than one solution. So one solution is sufficient to represent everything about the customer's systems, your company's applications, their business processes, everything is documented in one single solution. So it has solution documentation. It also has certain standards, which means that what kind of template would you like to use for function specification? What kind of templates would you use for test cases? So those kind of standards are set against the solution. It also has a system landscape. It also has a change control landscapes, which means that you could have a large set of systems in the system landscape, but then only a certain number of systems are controlled by Solution Manager from a change and charm perspective. So change control landscape is also part of the solution. We also have, let's say, certain views and scopes that are created. View was not there anymore, but scope is a way of focusing on a subset of the solution documentation. So imagine if you're a large customer, you have tons and tons of business process documentation for various systems, various subsidiaries across the country, across the globe, and you would want to focus on a certain scope. Then you would have scopes defined in the solution, which will then give you a shorter view of things, a subset view of things, so that allows you to manage the solution in general. Then we have a site concept, which allows you to also differentiate between various landscapes. You could have one production landscape for Europe market, another for Africa market, and so on and so forth. So then you would want to create sites so that you can also distinguish between what happens in one site versus the other, or one landscape versus the other in such complex system landscapes as well. So all of this encapsulates or into one single solution. So solution is the mother of all. It allows you to document everything. For the sake of our discussion, We'll mainly be concentrating on the solution documentation piece, which is about documenting the structures, the process hierarchy, and the processes themselves. Yeah. And then we have branches. Branches allows us to create versions of the solution documentation, because while you are running through the project, you might be creating a whole bunch of documentation, a whole bunch of processes, but then they are still not live. They are still work in progress. So you would want to have a separate version of that maintained, but still in the same solution. So branches allows you to do that. And we have a very specific set of branch architecture, which I will explain in a minute, which is needed for Focus Build to work, right? So how do branches work? It's a quick overview of the branch architecture. So typically when you create a solution in Solution Manager, you have two branches, two versions. One version is called the production branch. The other one is called the maintenance branch. Right? This is default branches that are created as and when you create a solution. Right? So the production branch represents whatever is live or whatever is productive. So it has process documentation, documentation related to functional specifications, test cases, everything, whatever is live. And that's why it is locked, which means that you can't modify this documentation anymore once it is in the production branch, right? It's almost like your production system, right? From if you want to draw parallels to your system landscape. A maintenance branch is, like the name suggests, is for maintaining the production branch, which means that if you want to make any changes to any documentation in the production branch, then you bring it down into the maintenance branch, and then you make the changes and then push it back into production branch. Now, by nature, there is a parent-child relationship, which means that the production branch, the maintenance branch is a child of the production branch. So whatever is there in the production branch is visible in the maintenance branch as well. But if you start to modify something in the maintenance branch, then that creates its own version, and that has to be explicitly released so that it goes back into production. You can really draw parallels to the system landscape, where maintenance branch is like your maintenance system and production branch is like your production system. If you are doing a bug fix in the maintenance branch, you make modifications to that code in the maintenance branch and release the transport back into the production system. Similarly, if you can draw that to the documentation here, where the documentation is locked in the production branch, and any modifications that you do in the maintenance branch will remain in the maintenance branch until you release them to the production branch, right? But this is for day-to-day operations. Similar to projects, what happens typically with system landscapes is that when you have a new project, you create a new project dev system, a new project quality system, etc. Similarly, for Focus Build as well, we create 3 new branches, right? This is an architecture that we have mandated with Focus Build, where you need to have a branch which is created under production called development branch. Underneath the development branch, we have a design branch. Underneath the design branch, we have an import branch, right? The import branch is the shopping cart link there, which shows that you can just import anything there, right? You can bring in SAP best practices, model companies, activate best practices, partner best practices, whatever you have, you just dump in there. And then you shop around, pick and choose what you want and bring it to the design branch. Now, design branch is where it gets real, where you try and modify these to your business requirements and then show it to your business in the design branch and start to capture the gaps and requirements from there. Once the design is finalized or the processes are finalized, they are then released into the development branch, where the actual realization of these requirements will happen. The developers will start to create test cases and specifications and then put that into the development branch, right? Typically, once the processes come into development branch, we don't expect that there is any process change, right? Of course, there are more documentation added to this, but process changes are not expected after it goes into the development branch. Once the entire project is over, from the development branch, they all go into the production branch, right? So that's how the branch architecture works. And this is important to understand because Focus Build expects you to have a solution which has a development branch, design branch, and import branch. Because a lot of entities that we have in Focus Build, like requirements and work packages, they work against these branches, right? That's important. That's why this branch architecture is important. Design and import branch are the ones that are used in the discovery workshops or where you actually run the design workshops. And for most of our discussion today, we will be working with the design branch. And on day 2, we will go into the development branch. Then we have the content within Solution Manager is architected in for reusability, which means that when you create business processes, etc., there is a lot of building blocks, a lot of reusable libraries that we have, and so Solution Manager is built with such a library architecture, which means that we have something called as a development library. Then we have an executable library, which development library holds all your Z objects and Y objects, all the development objects that you plan to develop. Executable library has a whole bunch of executables like Fiori objects, Fiori applications, transaction codes, and so on and so forth. Then we have a process step library, which then holds a whole bunch of process steps, essentially steps to execute these Fiori applications, like create sales order is a process step, create billing document is a process step, etc. As you can see, there are links from process step library to executable library, and from executable library to the development library. And then we have two other libraries. One is called as the interface library, where you document all your interfaces, all the connections between various systems, ECC to CRM interface, CRM to external bank interface, right? So all of these interfaces are documented in the interface library. And then you build the processes, right? And the process means a process diagram, and then you reuse a whole bunch of things from these different libraries, and then you build the process structure or process hierarchy, the process diagram. Right. So it's important to understand that there are libraries that could be reused. So which means that when you create a new diagram, you're not going to recreate process steps every time you create a new diagram. You will be reusing if it already exists. So if create sales order is created once, it is always reused whenever an order related business process is drawn. Right. So this is also a concept available in Solution Manager. Now, when you import best practices from SAP, you get these libraries also preloaded, right? So you get when you download, I will show the activate best practices in a minute. When you download S/4HANA best practices, you will get a library of all Fiori applications into the executable library of your solution, right? When you download the best practice from SAP, you get the libraries as well as the process structures imported into Solution Manager. Yeah, and that's also important to understand. Seems to be a lot of chat on the chat window. Let me just check if there's something. All right. Okay, so I will take these questions in a minute. Let me just go through the presentation, and then we will come back to the questions at the end so that it's easier to answer that way. All right, so the libraries elements are there, and then there is this concept of original versus reference, right? So in the library, in the executable library, there is an executable original, right? So if you store anything in the original, it is available everywhere that is used, right? But then in the process step library, when this executable is used, it creates a reference for this executable. And anything that you store at that level will only be available at that level, which means that if you store anything against the executable reference, then you're storing it against only that reference, but not in the original, right? So there is a concept of original and reference that you have to remember, and that's applicable to every library object that you have, right? Similarly, we have a process step library. So there is also a process step original and a process step reference as well. So the process step original always is there in the library, and the reference for that is there in the process diagram that you create or a process structure that you create, right? So it's also important to understand that there is this concept of original and reference that exists for all the library entities of our solution, which you need to understand, because if you store something in the reference, it might not be available elsewhere because it's only stored in the reference. But if you store a document, let's say in the original, then it's available everywhere, right? So that's also important to understand. Then when you have such a hierarchy where you have the process diagram, then a whole bunch of libraries, the question comes in, where do I store what? Where do I store a test case? Where do I store a specification? So here we have a standard defined as well, where if you want to start to write a business process description document, that is typically stored against the business process. If you want to write a specification document, like for a RICEF, that is stored against the process step library. If you want to write a specification for interface, that goes into the interface library. If you want to create a configuration guide, that goes into the configuration library, like an IMG guide that you want to write. If you want to create a technical design, that typically goes and sits against the development library or executable library, right? If you want to create an integration test case, which is going across, that is typically stored against the business process. If you want to create a single functional test, which is testing only one single process, for example, or process step, then that's stored against the process step. And so that's, there are different document types that we have in Focus Build, and they are stored at different places. So this slide explains which document goes where. So when you, as a developer in the work package, when you want to create a specification, you create the specification from the work package Fiori app. It goes and sits at the appropriate place in the documentation, right? So the developer is not really accessing the process structure. The developer is still working with the Fiori app, but then the document automatically goes and sits against the appropriate space here in the architecture, right? So we have abstracted that for the developer so that they don't need to worry about where the document is stored, but they just need to worry that they have to create the document in time with the right template, and then the document is created for each work package or each work item. Yeah, that's important to understand. All right, so let's look at the UI a little bit before we jump into the demo, and then I'll go through the chat questions as well. So this is how the solution documentation UI looks like. On the top of the slide, you have the column browser, which shows the process hierarchy or the process structure. Remember, I said there are two things. One is the process hierarchy, the other one is the process diagram. And this column browser is for you to navigate the structure, which means that you can navigate it one column after the other. If you click on something, then the next column changes with whatever you have clicked, based on whatever you have clicked. We will see that in the demo. Then we have the elements list, which means that based on the selection on the top in the column browser, there are certain elements that are listed below. For example, the documents that are assigned to it, the test documents that are assigned here, the diagrams that are created. If it's a process, then you create a diagram here. So the diagram also is created in the elements column. And finally, we have the attributes pane, which is then showing the attributes for a particular selection. For example, what is the name of this particular process? What are the attributes? Which country does it belong to? What are custom attributes that you have? And this is the place which is also important for you to look at the assignments, which means that if there is any requirement that is created against this process or process step, if there is any work package that is created against this process or process step, that also appears in the attributes pane. Yeah, so that pane is also important for finding out the assignments. Yeah, so this is a simple view. Of course, there are certain other links here, how to jump from one branch to another branch, and how to jump from one solution to another solution, and then some search related aspects are also available here, and so on and so forth. We will quickly look at that, but this is at a high level the overall UI of process management or solution documentation. And then those are called as the global functions on top. This is a sample process map that we have as a sample that you can create, right? And then you clicking on each of these plus icons, you can drill down into the processes and so on and so forth. Instead of such a generic example, I thought we could look at what are the possibilities for you to get content. Yeah. So as I said, if you want to start the project, you have multiple options. You can either start with SAP Activate, which is a best practice content coming from SAP. You can download that into Solution Manager, or you can purchase one of the model companies from SAP, which is industry best practices, which are having end-to-end processes that you download into Solution Manager as well, and you get model company processes, right? So these processes automatically come into Solution Manager, and then you can bring them into the import branch, like what I mentioned before, and then start to explore them and see how you want to leverage them in your project, right? I just want to take a quick demo, but before that, let me just see the questions and then see what is happening on the chat. All right, let me come from the top. Wow, lots of questions. Okay, I will answer as many as I can now and then come back to it later so that we don't miss out on the content. Let's see, can be used to manage non-SAP agile projects? Okay, there are more on the top. Okay, if a development needs to happen outside that, I have answered. Where does Jira integrate into work packages? Now, it integrates into work packages and also into work items. Yeah. If you are interested, I can just ping me and then I'll share more details on the Jira integration. Or maybe I'll include it along with the slide pack that I shared, that I will share later. Can we use it to manage non-SAP Agile projects? Yes, you can use, but then as I said, it is built for SAP projects, like for example, this SAP model company processes and so on and so forth, and transport management, all of that will not work for non-SAP. But technically speaking, yes, you can use it for non-SAP Agile projects as well. The demo link I will share later. If SAP S4 a prerequisite for focus build? No, it is not. We are using S4 as an example, but you could use it for implementing ECC as well. Yeah, so there's nothing that stops you. From a content perspective, we have very little content for ECC. A lot of process content that you will see now in the demo also is only available for S4 and the newer applications. But for ECC, we don't have any predefined content readily available. We have some old content, but I don't know how far it's useful for you. Then Felix, one of our old friends, is asking, I fully support BPM and tutoring. We have, however, come across a customer that is used to using EPC. No, we don't have any plans to consider EPC right now. It's a huge change, but we are sticking to BPMN right now because there's a lot of content that we have built in BPMN. So if you switch to EPC, then it becomes a problem. There's no investment in getting to EPC right now. Okay, is there any process diagrams available for ALM and focus build processes? Yes, interesting that you ask. Yes, you can also download Solution Manager processes like S4HANA processes into Solution Manager itself. So that's available in the same place where I'm going to show right now. And branch has changed control. Okay, this seems to be a detailed question about. Can you please ask this again on day 2, because this is related to charm and how we manage that. We will cover that on day 2. Charm user, please ask that question on day 2. The slides are shared. Yes, we will share the slides. Focus Builder to be installed on. No, Focus Build is installed on top of Solution Manager and not on ECC. Just to clarify. We purchase model company, but still processes and best practices to be merged in. Can we talk about how that is best done? It's a little bit of a detailed question. I think we need to talk that offline. If you can send me an email, I'll share my email address later. You can send me an email and then we can talk about that separately in terms of how to merge best practices and model company content. Content view also. I don't know what you mean by content view. I will find that out in a minute. Now we see both content and speaker on the same screen.
Hola, espera un momentito que voy a ver cómo paro esto. Que es que estoy en una sesión de SAP y está hablando un indio a la vez que tú, entonces.
I don't know if you're trying to reach me, Sergio. I'm not able to understand you. All right, can we use to manage non-SAP projects? I answered that. Once we import processes, yes, once we import the processes, we can selectively change them. I will also show that. If not using solution, is it fine? Now, Mohammed is asking, can we use it without solution documentation? You can, but it will be broken in a few places. It gets a little bit more difficult, but yeah, technically you can use it without solution documentation as well. At least we need the branches, and in the setup, we need to create a solution and branches. But if you don't have the full structure, that should still be okay. But let's say if you want to store any document like function specification or test case, you need some structure. So solution documentation is required if you want to use Solution Manager from that point of view. How does this link to test suite? We will cover that on day 2. Can we convert process diagrams and collaboration diagram to test script? Unfortunately not, Amit. We cannot convert the process diagram into a test script. We can convert the structure into a test script, which is possible, which I will show on day 2. Right. With that, let me jump to my demo. Otherwise, we will miss a lot of important content. All right, let's go back to my demo. Now I will go to the architect view and then launch solution documentation, right? So as I said, the architect has many other things like work packages, work items, defects, and defect corrections, which are related to testing and change and release management related stuff. And also from project related tasks, you can look at your tasks and then update completion of your tasks and so on and so forth. You can also have a view to the requirements and so on and so forth. But let's look at solution documentation once it loads. Yes, so this is the view. As I mentioned before in the UI, we have the column browser, we have the elements here, and then we have the attributes, right? Let me jump to one particular process. All right, maybe before going there, let me just show, also launch the Best Practice Explorer so that you can also see the Activate best practices, how you can download them and load them into Solution Manager. While that loads, let me just go back to my documentation. So here I have loaded the SAP best practices for S/4HANA. So these are the SAP best practices for S/4HANA, I think 1909, if I'm not mistaken. And a whole bunch of processes come in, a whole bunch of process steps come in. I'm looking at J60, which is accounts payable. All of this content is automatically downloaded into Solution Manager. This is what we mean by starting with a baseline so that you don't need to build everything from scratch. So if you have something like that, you could also isn't working. Let me just close this. We don't need that. You can directly look at the diagrams as well. Let me see if I have a favorite in my diagrams. No, I don't. So let me just open the accounts payable diagram here so that you can also see what kind of process content that you get. All of these building blocks and these diagrams and so on and so forth are all coming in. Let me just see one of the collaboration diagrams, maybe the payment run. So when I click on the payment run, then it opens up the diagram, right? So I'm right now in the design branch, as you can see here. So I can modify this, create requirements, and then modify this process diagram. I can show it to my business users and then show how payment run is typically done in S/4HANA. Are they okay with this process flow? Schedule the payment proposal, revise the payment proposal, and release the payment proposal. That's a very simple payment run. Maybe we go, let's say the main one. Maybe it's a little bit more complex diagram. So this is for accounts payable, where we are. So all of this content, what you see here, is coming with Activate best practices, right? So you can zoom in here and then see the processes and process. There are some sub processes as well. So our online payment manual is a sub process. You can see the plus icon. All this diagram is actually coming from the best practice, right? Then you can modify this. You can edit this diagram, create your own process steps, and so on and so forth. You can go into the edit mode and then start editing this diagram and then say, hey, this is the best practice, I understand, but then we need to add more process steps. Maybe I want to create a new process step here and then say this aging analysis needs to be done. So I then try and bring that into my diagram, right? So if I just zoom in that, I have added that to my diagram. And then now I can connect it from here to there. And then voila. We are done with enhancing the process diagram with adding a new process step. You can also create new process step if something is not there. Let's say as part of the payment run, you have to integrate with your bank. If you want to integrate with Citibank in your country, then that integration has to be custom built. So that process step about going to the bank and coming back is something that is not there in the standard. So that's something that you can add here as part of this process diagramming approach as well. So this is how you do process modeling. You have also what is important is that because I've picked in aging analysis, which is a standard process step, which is coming from the library, I've not created a new one. Automatically, the Fiori application that was assigned to it is available for me in my diagram as well, right? So this is important to note. As you can see here, when I added aging analysis to my diagram, I get in the element section for the aging analysis, the Fiori app for aging analysis as well available here. Right? If I created something from scratch here, then obviously I will not have any elements because it's not coming from a reusable library. If you want to search for the library, you can search here and then add them from the library. So the library is very important because we want to encourage reuse so that if there is one process step called aging analysis that was once created with the Fiori app assigned to it, maybe somebody would have created a test case for it, then you don't want to repeat over and over again, right? So you want to reuse that. And that's the concept of a library where so things are stored in the library which can be reused as well. Yeah, good. What else on this? Let me just go back to the structure. I want to save this. Now it's important to understand the structure a little bit. So at the root, we have two folders. One is called as business processes. The other one is called as a library. So when I go into the libraries, you will see all the libraries, which I mentioned earlier. For example, if you want to see the process step library, then you see the process step library here. Then you can go through the process step library for S/4HANA. Under FI, you can organize it the way you want. And then you can see the process step originals here, right? So this is how you navigate the library. So the same UI is used to navigate the libraries as well as to navigate the business processes as well, right? So if I go back to the solution now, from the breadcrumb here, then I can navigate to the business processes. I have various business processes. This is a demo system, by the way. This is also accessible to you. You can also play around here, create your own folders, create your own libraries, create your own process diagrams, and so on and so forth. So all of that is then possible if you navigate into this process structure as well, right? And then we have the attributes plane here. If I select something here, for example, here it's a process step folder for FI. Then for that folder, you have the name and when was this last changed by whom, what are the related documents, if there are any assignments here, anybody created any requirements, anybody created any incidents, anybody created any work items or work packages, all of that is available in the attributes plane here. Oops, something happened. Let me just see, somehow it got timed out. Because it's running through the internet demo system, sometimes that could happen, so please bear with us. So if you are selecting a particular process step here, for example, you see all the attributes here, and then the assignments and so on and so forth. What else on the documentation? Let me just see. So there are more best practices here as well. For example, if you explore here, we have created a best practice which is called as end-to-end processes versus modular processes, right? End-to-end processes are processes which are going, let's say, across systems, across business units, and so on and so forth, assemble to order, procure to pay. These might be going from C4C to S/4HANA to something else or something else, right? Order to cash might be going from C4C to something else and something else. So we could create end-to-end scenarios like this, order to cash, procure to pay, and so on and so forth. This one is order to cash, which grows across systems. Or you could create modular processes, which are here in the modular processes area. Like, for example, under purchasing, you have a bunch of modular processes. These are only in the purchasing area, right? And then these modular processes can be reused to build end-to-end processes, right? As part of focus build training, we also have some best practices in terms of how to model your business processes, how to model modular processes, end-to-end processes, how to structure, how to do naming conventions. All of that is part of the focus build training as well. So I will highly encourage you to actually go through that, at least the solution documentation part within the OpenSAP, right? So while we are on the topic, let me just launch that OpenSAP course. So this is the focus build course that we have in OpenSAP. You can search for this either for focus build, for solution manager, etc. And if I go to the learnings, you will see that there are each week is divided for various topics. Unit 1 is for introduction. Then we have project management, working with milestones. Then this is all project management in this week. Then let me just see the syllabus. I think that makes more sense. We have the second one is for the process expert and analyst. This is where you have all the solution documentation related one. There are also hands-on exercises here, which we can practice on the same demo system that I'm showing as well, right? And then we have week 3 for architect and developers, week 4 for test management and testers, week 5 for release management, and week 6 for general focus build, setup and configuration, etc. Right? So this is a fantastic OpenSAP course. So I will strongly recommend you to actually go through this if you want to learn more deeper in terms of exactly how to use our tools as well, right? Other than this, before I go back to the presentation, there's a list view. There's also a search if you want to search for anything. If you are especially running your system on HANA, the search is extremely fast. Otherwise, this depends on T-Rex. So you need to configure T-Rex for the search here. For example, if I want to search for order management or something like that, then what happens is it searches in all the structures everywhere to see wherever order management is there, and then gives you the results. Order management is there in this process diagram, order management is there in this particular process, and so on and so forth, right? So the search is extremely useful. Right now it's searching only under purchasing. If I go back here under business processes, the search result will expand into search into the entire business process structure that we have in Solution Manager, right? Search is extremely useful. Then here is where you switch to branches. If you want to see what is there in the import branch, what is there in the design branch, you can switch branches. As I mentioned before, you can see a small indent here. The import is under design, design is under development, development is under production. Yeah. So once you are done with selecting what you want to use as a baseline, you bring them into design the processes. Once you want to start development, you bring them into development. Once the project is over, you bring that into production. Yeah. So that's how the branch architecture works. All right, let's see. I think we are pretty much done here. Let's see if there are more questions, and then we go back. How does this link to, I don't know where I left off last time. Okay, how does this link to test suite? We will explain it on day 2, but essentially wherever you have the elements tab, that's where you load your test cases, and that's how your test cases will be linked to your business processes. Can we convert process diagram and collaboration diagram to test script? I said no. Is the best practice available for Nigeria country specific? I'm not aware. If they're available in this best practice explorer, sorry, let me just move this aside. If you want, you can go to this rapid.sap.com/BP, the best practice explorer, where you can see all the best practices. If they're available there, then you can use it.
Unfortunately, Nigeria is not available.
Ah, okay. So I'm sorry, then Nigeria is not available.
But to be frank, we don't know what is the nearest possible one for this one, because your American process and European process are definitely different.
Yeah, most customers that I know where things were not available, they were going for the US processes and modifying them, and then not selecting the ones which are, let's say, heavily country specific, like finance related processes are very country specific, but maybe logistic related processes are not so country specific. So maybe you can leverage the US ones over there. So it becomes limited for you if the country version is not available. You could also obviously pick the finance processes from US, but then you will have to modify them significantly for Nigeria, for example. I really
even the core logistics process like MM and SD, which are more procedural oriented, you will have issues.
Okay, I think we have whatever we have here in the best practice library is what we can leverage into Solution Manager. And somebody asked the best practices for Solution Manager.
And I think industry solutions are also not there.
Yes, industry solutions are coming with model company, and that you have to purchase from SAP. Okay. So somebody asked if there are processes for Solution Manager and Focus Build. Those are available in the Solution Manager packages here in the Best Practice Explorer. Define processes for PI and PO migration project. We don't have any process content for PI or, yeah, I think, let me just, we don't have any specific content for PI and PO migration project. Unfortunately, you'll have to build those process structures from scratch. But again, a migration project is not really a business process centric project that way. So you're not building new business processes, you're technically migrating, I presume, in which case a business process based off running the project might not make sense. What sizing requirement to implement Focus Build? There's a sizing guide, Amit. So you'll have to follow the sizing guide with Focus Build, and then that will help you size the system for Focus Build. Can we create requirements directly from Fiori Tile, not from Solution? Yes, we will be creating that in a minute. You will know how to create requirements directly from Fiori Tile. Then there was also one question which I thought, the difference between process diagram and collaboration diagram, right? The difference is mainly in terms of the palette that is used. What collaboration diagram typically is used more for integrations and going across systems and collaboration style diagrams. Process diagram is more within one system, or which is mostly for business processes which are not depicting collaboration elements and so on and so forth. So that's the difference between these two diagram types that we have. All right, with that, let me just jump. Unfortunately, we don't have more time for questions. We'll come back to them at the end once the requirement section is completed. Right, somebody asked a question also on import branch. So what happens is that once you go to the import branch, let me just go there. You have a whole bunch of structures here, like what we have before. Let's say the corporate solution. then you can do best practice import. Let me just see where are the best practice import. Let's say you have the best practices import here, and then you can then say that I want to select a few of them. Like for example, requisitioning is important for me, accounts receivable, accounts payable. What typically is done is that they take copies of these and put into a structure. Like I created a structure for our workshop here called FB workshop and created logistics, and then copied a bunch of best practice processes which I got from Activate, like 5 of them. Now then what I do is I then release this into my release branch, into my design branch. So when I say release changes by right clicking on my folder, new folder here, then that whole structure, the subset of my imported structures are then taken into the design branch, and then I start to modify them there. So that's an easier way to actually manage whatever you get from different imports. You can bring them here into one folder which you want to take it into the design branch. Because if you take the entire structure that you have imported into the design branch, then it becomes a mess for you to manage. It's better that you reorganize it in the import branch and then release it, so that you start with a cleaner design branch as we move forward. Yeah, so that's one best practice. Good. Let's see how we are. We still have about 20 minutes. So let's see if we can cover a little bit on the requirements. Branch concept, we looked at it. Process modeling, we looked at it briefly, and also solution documentation. Activate content, maybe I just quickly browse through one of them. So you can see, if you go to the Business Process Explorer, I'm looking at the S/4HANA on-prem one, for example, 8 packages are available. And then you can see S/4HANA best practices for S/4HANA on-prem, and then you see the best practices here. You can browse through them, all of them here. Otherwise, you can also import them into Solution Manager, in which case they will be available in Solution Manager and Solution Documentation, right? So in finance, accounts and finance closing, J58. So the same J58 will also be available once you import it here. So the same J58 is also available here, right? So whatever you see here, the building blocks, the diagrams, etc., are the same things that you see here in the Best Practice Explorer as well. Yeah. All right, so that's Activate. So let's now move on. I just want to quickly show you one customer example. So this is one customer in Australia, how they have documented the processes for large implementation, which is not just S4. They have a lot of cloud applications, SuccessFactors, Ariba integrated into S4 on-premise. They've created a humongous amount of process structures in Solution Manager. So this is their numbers 2 years ago, but this is now increased quite significantly. I hear now that they have 20,000 plus process steps. So it's a huge implementation where they have documented everything in one Solution Manager system. So this is their hierarchy. They have process groups here on one side, and then the scenario, process, and process step at the bottom 3 levels. So this is the 5-level hierarchy that they have for their process structures. This is one of the diagrams. You can't read anything in there, but just wanted to show you how complex you could get if you want to. And this is indeed for SuccessFactors related process. So they have built it from scratch, which the entire thing was drawn by their process experts. So you could get really, really comprehensive with respect to process modeling. So I just wanted to show this example so that you understand how customers are using Solution Manager and process management. All right, with that, let's jump to requirements management. Maybe we will not have enough time to do the demo. We will have to do that on day 2. But let's at least cover off how requirements management, which is the next step, right? So once you start the project, either you start with Activate or model companies or any other best practice, you have drawn your business process models and you start to show it to your business. Then you need to identify what are the gaps and document them as requirements. And that's where requirements management capability of Focus Build comes into play in your early stages of the project when you're starting to capture the scope of the project. So requirements management is used to create requirements during the validation workshops. So that's what we typically call. If you follow the Activate methodology in the explore phase, we have a validation workshop where we sit with the customer, sit with the business users and identify the fit of these business processes to your business, and also identify the gaps and then document those requirements into Solution Manager. Ideally, you should be creating requirements as against a business process, which means that while you are showing this business process, you click on a process step and you say that I want to create a requirement. Yeah, that's how you create a requirement. And then these requirements that we create in Focus Build can support multiple languages. It has a tight integration into process documentation, obviously, but also into the downstream activities like work packages, work items, etc. So from requirements, you then flow into other build activities as well, right? So that's requirements management. This is just a slide I picked up from the Activate slide deck, which then talks about how you do fit gap analysis, typically using Activate. You do a solution documentation workshop where you show the processes, then you validate the SAP solution. Even you have a pre-configured S4 system where you demo the system to the business users and identify the gaps and create a product backlog, which are essentially the requirements. And then you get into a delta design and then verify and accept and then finalize the product backlog for actual build activity. This is what Activate talks about. I'm not going in detail about Activate, but I just picked up one slide from Activate just to show you where Solution Manager and Focus Build fits into the Activate methodology, for example. So if I try to expand that, this is a busy slide. I will also share the slide, but this is where various capabilities of Solution Manager fit into the same solution validation and delta design process of Activate, right? For example, when you're doing the fit gap workshops, then you're using the process management and also the solution readiness dashboard to actually track the validation that is happening. You show the process models in the process management, you track the requirements in the requirements management capability. Then there is gap documentation, which is essentially in Solution Manager terminology, requirements documentation. You use the My Requirements app, you rework the requirements, you change the priority. All of that is done in requirements management in Solution Manager and Focus Build. Then you do scope prioritization. So we have with the requirements management app, you are able to look at a certain score for the requirements. We have attributes like effort points, value points, which I will show in a minute. Using that, you can prioritize your requirements and create an initial backlog with that. And once you go into the build phase, for the identified requirements, you start to create work packages, you put them into the initial waves based on the priority, and the later part of requirements will go into later waves and so on and so forth. All of that we will see on day 2, but that's done with work packages, work items, wave planning, agile planning. All of that comes into play in the delta design part of the Activate methodology. Yeah. So this is just to map what we do in Solution Manager to what is prescribed by Activate in terms of the overall methodology to run an S4 project or a implementation project. So typically what happens, the requirements are gathered in the fit gap workshops, right? Initial backlog is created. They are typically created against the process structures and process diagrams, right? So you go through the diagram, you look at the process step where the requirement is coming in and create the requirement there. Then there is a very small approval workflow, which means that every requirement in Solution Manager has to be approved. You can also approve them in mass, but there is an approval workflow that is built in to Focus Build. Certain users who have authorization to approve will be able to approve these requirements. And only upon approving these requirements will you be able to create work packages and actually start working on those requirements. Yeah. And then you could also have a approval board. That's also a typical recommendation where you can look at them in mass and then do a mass change of all the requirements. Okay, these are the requirements that were collected in last week's workshop. There are 150 of them. Let's approve all of them, and then you can approve all 150 of them together, right? So there is an approval of the requirement that is needed for you to actually work on those requirements. Then there is a classification of the requirement. So we have different types of requirements. There is a requirement of the type gap, which means that new development is needed. Typically, a lot of technical design is needed. Developers are needed to actually work on this particular requirement called gap. Then there are RICEF requirements. You can classify a requirement as RICEF, and then which means that there is an extension to SAP that is needed either in the form of a report or an interface or whatever is RICEF. And then there are requirements which are fit. If the requirement is of the type fit, which means that there is no coding required, but maybe there is some customization or configuration that is needed in the S/4HANA system. So then you will classify this requirement as fit. And sometimes you could also create non-functional requirements. These might be created even without a business process context. These are non-functional requirements that are given by business or coming from IT. You can document them as non-functional requirements. Yeah. So this is the requirement classification that we have within Focus Build. Where are requirements created? They are created against the process structure, process hierarchy, either within the process model or within the process hierarchy, right? And the elements where requirements are supported are process or process step or within the library. So process step reference, you can create a requirement, or process step original if you create a requirement, right? There is a slight difference. So if you create a requirement against process step original, everywhere this original is used, you will see these requirements. If you create it only within the process step reference, then only in that instance or in that reference is where the requirement is seen, right? The association of the requirement happens either to a process step original or a process step reference. Then you can also create it against configuration items. You can also create it against an executable item. So if there is a Fiori executable that you documented in the executable library, against that you can create a requirement as well, or you could also create it against a development library as well, or the interface library elements. So pretty much everywhere in the process hierarchy, you could create a requirement. The only places where you cannot are to the folders, the folders that we have in structure, because these don't have any business context per se, and also scenarios, because these are too high level. But for a process and a process step, you can create a requirement. Yeah. Then requirements are shown in two places. One, if you see the process diagram, there are certain icons that start to show up once you have requirements assigned to this particular process. Let's say you have a requirement assigned to create purchase order, then the requirement icon shows up on top. Or you can go to the attributes pane, and then you will see in the related documents something called as requirements, and you see that there is one requirement assigned for this particular process step. Right? This is where you will see. I will show that in the demo as well. Then there are different methods to get to requirements management. Either you can, if you already have documented the requirements, just go through the animation. If you have, if you want, the ideal state would be to come via the process management diagram. So you're showing the diagram to someone, you identify a gap, and then you create a requirement there. So that's the ideal case. If you have an Excel, there is an Excel upload functionality. If you have a list of requirements that were pre-collected from some other exercise, etc., you can put them in an Excel and then upload them into the requirements management. Then you will get a whole bunch of requirements. But the important thing to note is that then you need to do a manual assignment to the process structure. This becomes a very tedious activity. So we should try and avoid this as much as possible, because there will be a manual activity to go to each requirement and see which process structure does it belong to. Yeah, you can also do it either from the diagram or from the column browser, and then you can also do an initial download and upload. Let's say you have created it in one solution manager system of a partner or of one of your vendors. You can download it from there, all the requirements, and bring it back into your own solution manager system, so that download upload is also then possible. All right, let me just go through this animation. Right. So this is a detailed workflow of the requirement. As soon as you create a requirement, it goes into a draft state. The first status that the requirement will be is in the draft status. And then once you say send for approval, it goes into waiting for approval stage, and then to be approved state. And once it is approved, it goes into approved state, right? If it is not approved, it could either be postponed or rejected. Right? So if it is rejected, it goes into the rejected state. If it is postponed, which means that I don't want to do it in this program, I will do it maybe later, then I do a postpone. And from a postponed requirement, you can recover that into a draft state and then go through the procedure again. From the rejected one also, you can go through, recover it, and then go into the draft state. From the draft state itself, you can withdraw a requirement that goes into the cancel state. Right? Also, a rejected requirement can be withdrawn and then gone into a cancel state. Once it is cancel state, that's final, which means that you can't change from cancel to anything else. Right? So the withdraw action is pretty critical, because that will change the status into cancel, and after that you can't retrieve the requirement. Yeah. Once it is approved, you can create a work package. Right? And then once the work package is in development, when the status of the work package goes into development, automatically the requirement status also goes into realization. You see the dotted line here, which means that this status is set by the work package. Until here, it is set by user actions. Right? These are all the actions on the arrows. But from here onwards, it is set by another entity. So here it is set by work package. Once the work package is in development, it goes into in realization. Once the work package is set to development complete and test complete, then the requirement goes to realized status. Once the work package is ready for release, then requirement is completed, right? So all of these three statuses are automatically set by other entities of focus bin, right? You see now how the entities are now starting to talk to each other, right? So requirement talks to work package talks to work item talks back to work package talks back to requirement, etc. Right? So there's a lot of communication happening between various entities of focus build, and that's why focus build is a very tightly knit workflow mechanism which cannot be and should not be modified, right? So you can't add a new status here if you want to, right? So focus build doesn't allow that because it's all tightly configured and it is linking to other entities of focus build. So focus build is frozen that way from the workflow perspective, and we believe this is sufficient for most customers, and you cannot modify these workflows. The same applies to work packages and work items as well, which we will see on day 2. These are some aspects of the requirement. Generally, the requirements are created in the design branch, and they're not released to the development branch per se, but they're created against the design branch, right? It could be related to any process structure in Solution Manager, as I said, process or process step, and it could also be non-process related, in which case they become non-functional requirements. Generally, there is an M-to-N relationship to work packages, which means that one requirement can go into multiple work packages, or multiple requirements can go into one work package, and so on and so forth, right? So yeah, ideally they should be consolidated, otherwise it becomes difficult to manage. This is more common sense than anything else. And then all requirements need to be approved, and then they have an automated status that is updated from the work package, as I explained before. And then we also have categories of that you can configure, so that you can also see what kind of requirements these are. So when I went into the requirements dashboard, if you remember earlier in the demo, we saw that there is FI requirements, SD requirements, etc. So that's classification or categories that we can do, and the same classification is used for work packages and work items as well, right? So that's also possible. All right, so let's see the time. I think we don't have too much time for the demo. We will start with the demo on day 2. Let me just quickly look at the questions, and then we'll do a short recap for day 1. Let me see. Okay. How does this link to independent? Okay, okay. Let's see. There is no demo of Jira and Focus Build integration that has to be built at the customer, Alistair. And how do we do change impact assessment? We can talk about it on day 2. Change impact assessment is done using tools like Business Process Change Analyzer, but that's related to the technical changes that we do. I don't know if you're referring to that, but that's something that is out of scope for this workshop. If you want, you can research on Business Process Change Analyzer, and that explains how you can do change impact assessment in Solution Manager. If I upgrade 7.1 to 7.2, am I still able to use and modify my process from 7.1? Yes, as part of the upgrade from 7.1 to 7.2, you will do what we call as content activation, and that allows you to reuse or migrate the processes from the 7.1 system to 7.2. Yeah. It will be appreciative if we have recorded. Yes, we have the recorded version of the workshop. I will share it along with the slides. Then where will we find the copy of the presentation? We will share that with you later point of time. My connection dropped, so not sure whether you answered my question. Can we use Focus Build with ECC with Solution Manager? Yes, Jack, we can use. There's nothing stopping you from using it with ECC. The only caveat would be that we don't have best practice content for ECC available. You might have to build the processes from scratch. Then it's okay to use Solution Manager and Focus Build. How do we go about authorization? Is there also specific to role a consultant plays, or can anybody make changes as they wish? No, there are authorization control. There are multiple roles that come with Focus Build. If you remember my demo, I logged in with different roles, and you see only very specific stuff. So there is authorization concept built into Focus Build as well. There's a security guide that explains that in more detail. Then requirements management process flow. What happens if the requirement needs to change after the realization stage? No, there's no way to change the requirements. You need to log a new requirement through the scope change. There is a scope change possibility in work package. that could help to change the scope in the work package itself, and that could be tracked separately. But the requirements as such, you cannot do anything. You will have to create a new requirement and probably realize it with another work package and so on and so forth. Why are requirements not released to dev branch? They are not released to dev branch because they are created in the design branch, and then they are the assignments are not going from one branch to another. So if you've created it in the design branch, they'll remain in the design branch. If you have created it in the dev branch, then they reside in the dev branch. Because what happens if you go through the assignments, releasing them upwards, then in the production branch, when the processes come, they will get everything, right? And that becomes a mess to see it in the production branch. So we stopped releasing of these assignments or elements back into the parent branch, because that doesn't make sense in that branch, especially to avoid, let's say, too much information in the production branch. Need to create it from my requirements app. Can we do it? Yes, I will show it in the demo as soon as I start day 2, how to create requirements. Well done. Thank you very much for the feedback, Felix. I'm referring process change. Process change. I'm not sure what you mean by process change, user. Maybe you can unmute and ask the question after I answer all the questions, please. Sorry, there are too many of them here. Maybe just do a short demo. No, I don't know if people can stay back. I don't want to, if people want to leave, they have to leave. I'll do the demo on Monday. Otherwise, I will not be able to answer all the questions as well. Like charm, test suite management, etc. Okay, what needs to be in place in Solution Manager before starting the Focus Build project? Charm needs to be configured from a technical perspective, but otherwise a plain Solution Manager system technically configured with 7.2 with the latest support package and Focus Build add-on is sufficient to start. There is some amount of configuration of Focus Build, like categorization of requirements and which branch goes where, etc. That part needs to be done. There is a configuration guide for this. But other than that, Charm technically has to be set up. Nothing should be set up in test management. Nothing needs to be set up in test management. Charm technical setup means that activating Charm transport control on the dev system, quality system, etc. That part has to be done on it. If testing needs to happen outside of SAP external application, would you still log that as a requirement or just a gap? If testing needs to be done with external application, you would still log that as a requirement. I don't know how testing is related to requirements, Krista, but if work has to be done outside of SAP, like for example, bank integration to Citibank, you would still log that as a requirement. You would still get a work package and a work item. You might not have a transport request underneath, because the work has to be done in external, but for the whole workflow and tracking purposes, you could create all these entities for those non-SAP requirements, so to speak. All right, process change. Let me see if I missed out anything. I think I answered most of them. If not, please ask your questions again on day 2, and I'll explain. I'll just do a quick recap with a minute, and then we will end the session today. Yeah. So essentially, key messages from today's session: Solution Manager together with Focus Build accelerates the S/4HANA implementation, allows you to run projects with utmost transparency, like how we have seen in the process management, the project dashboard that we have seen, right? Focus Build and Focus Insights are now included in the Solution Manager usage rights, so you don't need additional licenses to use what I'm showing. Focus Build supports Agile methodology. We have not seen much of Agile today. We will see that on day 2. Process management, what we have seen is that a full-fledged modeling tool is available in Solution Manager. We recommend you to start with best practice content as a baseline. It is well integrated into the other aspects. That's the most critical part, which means that from process management, we go into requirements management and test management and everywhere else. And in requirements management, briefly, we have seen that we are allowing you to capture requirements against processes and process steps. And then there is a full workflow to manage the requirements from creation to realization. Yeah, so that's the summary for you. With that, let me see, there's still some chat going on in the chat window. Any last questions? Nope. Documents and links for further learning, please. We will send that, David, along with the recording. Just give us some time. You will all receive the presentation as well as the links that I promised together with the recording, right? If the testing happens, Krista, in a third-party system like Quality Center, yes, you can still do that. You can still use Focus Build, but the test results will not come back and show in our dashboard, right? Our test dashboard shows only testing that happens within Solution Manager. If it happens in a third-party tool like Tricentis or from HPALM or something like that, or Micro Focus ALM, then you could still do that, but then the results will not come into our dashboard. So that will be a disconnected testing that happens, right? No information flows from here to from Focus Build to HPALM, and no information comes back into Focus Build as well, right? All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time. And I'm really glad it worked out well today as compared to yesterday. And I'm hoping to see most of you on Monday. Hope you have received the Zoom information over there as well. And have a nice weekend and have a great day. Thank you very much.